Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're a brand new subscriber or a brand new viewer. My name is Kyle. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is set to hit theaters June 30th of this year. And in preparation, I have decided that I'm going to be talking about one Indiana Jones film per month leading up to its release. And this month we are talking about the film that started it all, 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark. The movie was of course directed by Steven Spielberg, produced by Frank Marshall, with a score by John Williams, and starring Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. This review will contain spoilers. I'm sure that everyone who clicked on this review has already seen the film, but in case if you are that one individual that has not sat down and watched this film, you need to go watch it. You're doing yourself a disservice, but please go watch it and come back to this review. Reviewing a movie like Raiders is going to be a bit of a challenge because, similar to a movie like Titanic that I talked about a couple months ago, this is one of the most popular movies ever made. It's viewed by fans not just as one of the best action films, but one of the best films ever made, one of the most influential films. The movie has been discussed and analyzed to death since its release in 1981. So the tricky part about this review is how can I sort of differentiate myself from other people? And I feel like the best way that I did it back in December when I talked about Titanic and how I'm going to do it with this movie is to simply discuss my childhood story about how I got introduced to the character, and then to jump into the review and try to give you guys points that I found very intriguing on this rewatch. I started watching movies in 2004, but it was 2007 when my parents started to allow me to watch movies that weren't really kid-friendly or animated, and that was the year that I discovered Star Wars, and I also discovered Indiana Jones specifically by them because they weren't huge Star Wars fans. Raiders of the Lost Ark is the first movie that I vividly remember sitting in front of the TV with them watching as a kid. We got our flat screen TV in 2009, so before that we had what I like to call the box TV. It was a TV they got in the late 90s, and luckily it was able to play films in widescreen because the first thing I want to branch into in regards to this review is the fact that the movie is shot with anamorphic lenses. It was shot in widescreen. That allows for more images to fit the frame. It allows you to put more characters into a specific canvas than you would if it was shot in the traditional 185 to 1 aspect ratio. The biggest compliment you could ever give a movie, and I'm going to give it to Raiders, is the fact that it is an extremely entertaining and joyous movie. From beginning to end, it is absolute fun. It's such an easily accessible movie because right from the get-go, we're already into an adventure that Indiana Jones is having, but we don't quite know who he is at this point. For the first 3 minutes, every shot of him is either from far away or from behind. We don't really know who he is. He's just this mysterious man with a fedora. And all of a sudden, we have this close-up of a guy. He's about to betray him, pulls out a gun. All of a sudden, the mysterious man with the fedora turns around, cracks his whip, disarms the man, comes out of the shadows, and we get introduced to Indiana Jones, played by Harrison Ford. It's one of the greatest movie introductions of all time. If I never saw the movie again, I would always remember the introduction to the character. And I think this is the perfect time to talk about the music of the film by John Williams. I think everyone around the world knows who John Williams is and knows the fact that his score for the movie, like his scores for almost every movie he's ever composed, practically makes the movie twice as good. The movies just would not have the same flair without the music. And this is a perfect example of this because you're not hearing the theme of Superman when they introduce Indiana Jones. It's not this joyous audience clapping moment. It's very dark and sinister, almost like he's the bad guy. I believe this is a very wise and deliberate choice to have this type of music accompany the character because he is illegally going into these sacred grounds to, well, essentially steal these sacred artifacts to, with a good intention, put them in a museum where they can be properly preserved, but he is going into those places illegally. So you can call Indiana Jones an anti-hero. It makes perfect sense. He's in a foreign nation. He's hired people that clearly are not trustworthy, especially his main compatriot, played by a very young Alfred Molina. It was pretty awesome the first time I figured out who he was. The idol sequence is just a brilliant first major set piece of the movie. And I will say this right here. If you are a cinematographer and you love push-ins on a Dana Dolly, we are meant to connect with one another because I love the focus of this scene. You always feel this constant sense of energy and danger. In addition, it's interesting to note another flaw of Indiana Jones is that even though he is very cunning, very intelligent, he's not perfect. He's going to make mistakes, and it's going to be through his quick wits and cunning that he's going to get out of a situation by the skin of his teeth. That perfectly establishes the character for the entire franchise. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the boulder. It is one of the great sequences of all time, and it definitely inspired this little game called Temple Run that I used to play on my iPod when I was a kid. It's right here where we get introduced to the main villain of the movie, Belloc, played by Paul Freeman, who would later go on to star in one of my favorite comedies of all time, Hot Fuzz.
Oh, fuck off, grasshopper. No! Oh, Jesus Christ!
Here he plays a character that is very similar to Indiana Jones. They're both very intelligent, resourceful. They both know exactly what they want, but they're going to go to different methods in order to acquire the object. And of course, Belloc is in league with the Nazis, which is bad. Now Indy is running away, and this is where we finally hear the heroic Indiana Jones theme, just as he escapes from a near-death experience. It is a perfect coda to the opening sequence. And it's even more important because we discover his biggest fear, snakes. So when he's not traversing the world, he actually is an archaeology professor at a well-renowned university. We get introduced to Marcus Brody, played by Denholm Elliott. Great actor. I'm definitely going to have a lot more to talk about when we get to The Last Crusade, but I love the fact that he has such terrific chemistry with Harrison Ford immediately, without having to say a single word. You know that these two have great chemistry, but they also have a good history with each other. And this is where the plot of the movie kicks in, where Indiana Jones is hired by the United States government in order to find the Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis do. It's a very simple yet effective plot for two specific reasons. The first one being is when we get introduced to the government agents. One of them is Porkins from Star Wars, who is now the top men agent in the movie. And it's clear that these two men think very differently. One of them is extremely inquisitive. The other is just thinking this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. And the second reason is the Ark itself, the object of desire, what Indy is pursuing, the MacGuffin of the film. It's the fact that right off the bat, it's presented as this danger. And Marcus is saying whoever wields the Ark before him is invincible. And the fact that in the next scene, he talks about it's nothing like he's ever gone after before. I think it's phenomenal that we actually are scared of the main artifact throughout the entire movie, because we have to wait till the end to see what its power is. And it's also great that they waited until the next scene where they're in Indiana Jones's house to then discuss the character of Marion. I love the fact that they deliberately didn't mention that when he talked about Abner Ravenwood in the previous scene. I think that would have been a bit too much exposition. Steven Spielberg as a filmmaker has always said he wanted to make a James Bond movie, but at the time the producers only wanted international filmmakers to direct a Bond film. So Spielberg was thinking, well, I want to create my own rendition of the character. And when I was a kid hearing that, I was confused because I always just assumed the two characters were very different. But I had recently rewatched the movie Dr. No in theaters last year, and rewatching this film a couple nights ago, I was actually thinking that there were a couple of similarities. And I think the biggest one is no matter where the character goes, he is always in an immediate sense of danger. It shows the fun of the journey that he can take to exotic locations, but the fact that there was always somebody waiting to double-cross him or kill him. And I definitely think it was poking fun at the Roger Moore era of Bond, because everywhere he goes, everyone knows him. He's known throughout the whole world, so it's like, what's the point of being a secret agent or going on a secret mission when everyone knows you? I think that was a deliberate attempt of Spielberg to sort of poke fun at Bond, but also respecting the character. We're then introduced to Marion, played by Karen Allen. I think she is a fantastic actress, and I absolutely love the character in this movie. I like the fact that right off the bat, she is an independent businesswoman who can literally drink about 24 shots of probably the harshest whiskey known to man and can still form coherent sentences. It's a little bit over the top, but it does make the character fun and entertaining. And the fact that she is a feisty individual. This leads to one of my favorite shots of all time of Indiana Jones walking into the bar, and we see his silhouetted shadow on the wall. And I definitely want to pause for a second and talk about my thesis film that I made in 2021 called Kill Me Dead. There is a moment in the film which features the two lead characters, and there was a moment where my lead character stood up and my cinematographer was telling me, hey, that shadow looks pretty cool. And immediately I was like, okay, we're definitely going to have a shot specifically of their shadows on the wall, and I called it my Raiders of the Lost Ark shot, clearly inspired by this moment right here. Immediately, you get the sense that these two had a history together, and there is some unresolved conflict. but at the same time, they have such terrific chemistry that when they do eventually fall for each other as the movie keeps going, you just believe it because these two actors are excellent. We then get introduced to the slimiest character in the movie, Toft, and I swear, if there was an image next to the word slimy in the dictionary, this character would have it. The bar action scene is super fun, and there is one moment here that I'd like to talk about, and it's something that I never put two and two together with until I just rewatched the film. There's a moment where one of the assailants shoots Indiana Jones and actually nicks him towards the shoulder area of his left arm. And it's interesting because later on in the film, he gets shot in the exact same spot, although this time the bullet definitely goes through his jacket. I never noticed that before. I'm not sure if that was a conscious decision by Spielberg and the editors or if it was an unconscious decision, but it actually is pretty cool. And the shot of Tot screaming as he grabs the burning medallion will never not be funny to me. After this sequence, the movie definitely moves from place to place to place, but it has a terrific sense of fluidity. The pacing is always fast because the movie is always moving as the characters are always moving. We get introduced to Sala in the next scene, played by John Rhys-Davies. Absolutely love the character. He is one of my favorite side characters of all time. Definitely we'll talk more about him when we hit The Last Crusade. But I love the fact that Sala reinforces what Marcus was saying earlier about how dangerous the Ark is, where he goes, this is something that man was not meant to disturb. I definitely enjoy the ensuing action scene. It's a lot of fun. It's not perfectly choreographed, which I think actually is what they wanted to do. They wanted to make the fight feel as realistic as possible. And that could not be highlighted more in the sequence where Indy is up against the incredible swordsman and just decides to shoot him. I think that's one of the great moments in all of film. It is definitely, I think it's a moment for anyone watching. It's such an unexpected moment, and it wasn't originally in the script. Originally, there was supposed to be this massive fight, but Harrison Ford was suffering from dysentery. And Spielberg was like, what do we do? And Harrison just goes, why don't I just shoot him? And they were like, that's great, let's do it. And it led to one of the great moments in any film ever. We get reintroduced to Belloc. I love the anamorphic lens in the scene. It's great. You can capture both the characters and their intense reactions as Indy is pissed with the belief that Marion's dead. This is one of those reviews that could simply go on for an hour. So for the sake of time, I want to skip towards the Well of the Soul scene because that is really where the film continues moving with its plot. This is the moment where Indy faces his biggest fear, snakes. Snakes. Why do there have to be snakes? And has one of my favorite replies of all time.
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
Cross-cutting the sequence is Marion and Belloc drinking together, and I think for some people this scene may feel a bit odd considering how dire the situation is to recover the Ark, but I actually think it's a very interesting battle of wits because it's clear, as we saw before, Marion was out drinking the hell out of anyone that would dare challenge her, but Belloc has a moment where he says, this was my family liquor, I grew up on this. So it's clear that even though she's bullshitting him, he is also bullshitting her. I think that's terrific. It's something that I didn't notice when I was younger, but definitely just listening and paying attention, it's a really damn good scene. But of course, we want to see what the Ark of the Covenant looks like. And once again, I have to compliment the beautiful anamorphic lens. Douglas Slocum was the man who did the cinematography for this movie, and I love the incredible framing of this moment. You can fit both Indy, Sala, and the Ark of the Covenant in one shot. It's just gorgeous. Before James Cameron would come onto the scene, Spielberg was definitely the master at escalation. The fact that each sequence just seamlessly builds on the other one and just gives you more excitement. We then come to the amazing biplane sequence where Indy has the amazing fight with Pat Roach. Not the last time he's going to fight him, but definitely this scene is very intense because this man is whooping Indy's ass. And one of my favorite moments ever is just when he starts punching the dude like crazy. And then the guy's head is shredded by one of the propellers. Good God. I mean, wow. That was definitely a big step up for me as a 7-year-old kid watching this. And it's here where in a lot of movies nowadays, you'd have this sort of 10-minute break in which the characters would kind of just sort of reconvene and then kind of talk about stuff. But no, it immediately goes into my favorite scene of the movie, the truck chase. I love the fact that, again, this movie just knows how to properly escalate and just elevate its action sequences. This is one of my favorite action moments and one of my favorite scenes in film history. The incredible blocking, framing, staging, music, execution, everything about this scene is so eloquently done and filmed. And definitely my favorite moment is when Indy is thrown out of the truck and has to go literally underneath the truck, get back up there, take care of business, and the guy gets run over by the truck. They had to dig a 3-mile trench in order to get the shot of him going underneath the truck, because originally they didn't, and Harrison Ford's first stunt double went underneath the truck and smashed his head onto one of the metal beams of the truck. Yeah, that caused some stitches and some internal damage. So in order to remedy the situation, they had to dig a trench. It's one of the great ingenuity moments of film. I think for the first 90 minutes, Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of the most perfect films ever made. I really don't have any issues with it. I do have one problem with the movie, and that does deal with the submarine sequence. Now, I do love the boat sequence in which Indy and Marion definitely have their reconciliation with one another, but he swims from the boat to the submarine without anyone noticing. All of a sudden, someone notices when he hops aboard the submarine, and then he just kind of stands and turns around, and I don't know what the direction for that shot was, but then all of a sudden the submarine, I guess, submerges, and then we cut to them reaching the island, and in a blink and you'll miss it moment, I guess that is supposed to be Indiana Jones. I guess the sort of counter argument is that the periscope didn't go all the way down, but if it's a Nazi submarine, you would not want to be noticed or observed by anyone, so wouldn't you want to completely submerge into the water? I don't think they ever were able to make it make sense. There is a deleted scene of Harrison Ford hanging onto the periscope, but it does look very dumb. And then when the submarine docks into the port, he's suddenly on the second floor. He's already there. The continuity of it is a little bit awkward. I really feel like it's the one issue that I have with the movie that just doesn't make a lot of sense. What does make sense is his decision to not blow up the Ark, because he cares so much about the artifact, and he wants to see just as much as Belloc what's inside of it. But as we are told throughout the movie, the Ark is dangerous. And the fact that Indy knows that, he tells Marion to keep their eyes shut as they open the Ark of the Covenant. And as a 7-year-old watching this sequence, but I do think from an external sense, it's terrifying because they have their eyes shut, all the Nazis are there, they open their eyes, they're suddenly freed, and the Nazis are completely gone, nowhere to be found. Their souls were consumed by the Ark. But they don't quite know that. All they can do is just assume that everything is okay. And everything is okay because the movie basically ends right there. Indy and Marcus have no idea what the government has done with the Ark, and they're saying it has to be researched, but then they say that top men are working on it. Indy and Marion are unfortunately off to create Shia LaBeouf, but that's a story for another review. The Ark of the Covenant is then moved into Area 51 with an amazing matte painting to close the film. Raiders of the Lost Ark is, like I said before, one of the most popular films ever made. And it was difficult to review the movie because it has been reviewed so many times, and I'm sure there's a couple of points I've made that someone across the internet has made already, but this is just my thoughts on the movie. It is a brilliant action adventure film, one of the most fun movies ever made. It is simply entertaining and joyous. It's a very upbeat movie. I just absolutely love it. There is the submarine part that is a bit of an issue for me, but apart from that, this movie really is as perfect as it comes. In my heart, I give the movie an A+. For this objective review, being as objective as possible, I'm giving Raiders an A. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you very much for watching. I definitely appreciate it. Next month, we are going to be talking about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I am very excited to talk about that. I have a lot of interesting thoughts about that film. In the meantime, guys, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. The links to my social media pages are in the description box below, and my business website, kjgpictures.com. You can also find that in the description box below. Thank you all so much as always for watching, and stay tuned.